This is an oral history interview conducted for the Witness to War Serving a Nation project at Nauset Regional High School on Cape Cod, Massachusetts. For the sake of this interview, please state your full name and the community in which you currently reside. Your full name and the community in which you're currently living.
Well, my full name is Joseph Zdanovich. The middle name is Michael.
And where do you currently live?
And what?
Where do you currently live?
I didn't hear that clearly.
What town are you living in?
What county?
What town?
Oh, what town? I said Brewster, Massachusetts.
All right.
See, I don't know. The rebounding echo in here is killing the conversation.
All right. So we'll just start with a few questions about your childhood to start off.
Okay.
So as a child, what was your understanding of war?
Actually, in the 30s, I had no recollection. I would say that my whole life was my whole development in my young age was in the 30s, and the only understanding of war was it was in Europe.
And was anyone, if anyone in your family was in the military, who was that?
No, there
No
was
one?
no one, even in the vicinity of living in Boston, my birthplace. No one even had an idea that within that century, well, that particular span of years in the 30s, that anything would develop.
Yeah, but was anyone in your family, had anyone served in the military before you?
No, I only had a sister in the family.
What'd she think when you joined up? Did you join or were you drafted?
What was that?
Were you drafted or did you join up?
Actually, each and every street had, we had that particular draft during those days, and every street block had to appear at a certain place, and it was at North Station where they checked in everybody, and not adjacent to North Station there was a building where they had you had to register yourself in. We didn't have any mention of anything else but that, just the assurance that we're accounted for in the population. But then again, we were physically examined about a month later. It seems that the war just started to appear, and they had us registering again, but for physical reasons, to see if we were available. So when I came to the point where they said I was perfectly physically, mentally, and eyes and ears and all that, I was available for the draft. And somehow or other they said, would you prefer to pick out a particular service? Well, I was actually bumping into many Marines that were in the Chelsea Naval Hospital, and it dawned on me, well, why don't I choose the Marine Corps? And lo and behold, they put me down, Marine Corps. But I wasn't in the Marine Corps until you signed that big signature of yours, where they have you by the neck. In other words, we can't avoid anything. You're going in the Marine Corps.
So what was your most memorable experience from your service in the war? What was your most memorable experience during the war?
I would say that I'm a language person. I received a degree in a Paris degree in modern languages. And what interested me was the fluency of other languages and the people, the other persons in the draft along the corridor of the East Coast. When I bumped into them, I saw the world because I was more or less imprisoned by being a resident of New England.
So where exactly did you serve, and how was serving? Where exactly did you serve, and how was serving there?
Well, I served in the South Pacific, but believe it or not, I had to fight to get down there because I had so many qualifications that I had, within a span of 10 years, you can imagine, I had the whole world exposed to me in 10 years, from getting a diploma from high school, a wartime diploma, and then to top it all off continually, to go in the Marine Corps in the South Pacific, and then be discharged and to go to another prep school and college, all within 10 years, and graduate from both college. And so within a span of 10 years, I think I did a lifetime of travel and study.
So while you were in service, what was a typical day like for you?
What was
a typical day like while you were in service?
I didn't get that.
What was a typical day like while you were in the service?
Daylight?
Yeah, what was a usual day like?
Well, a day was just a day of worrying and about what would happen tomorrow. When I told my father, you mean in actual lifetime, at that time, my father was weeping over me when I told him I was leaving with the Marine Corps. And he started to cry. And I thought it was something for me to do, because I was very unhappy in those days, in the 30s, the Depression and all that. And I figure maybe I could see some of the light in this world going into the service. Would that be a good answer?
Yes, that would be great. So how did you have any free time while you were in the service, and how did you spend that if you did?
Free time?
Yeah, and how would you spend that if you had any time off?
Well, in the meantime, I had training in a trade school, and in my younger days, because who would ever dream that they would have a chance to go to higher learning? And in those days, you had to have a particular skill, manual skill. And I devoted all my time towards the particular study at a trade school, which was metalwork and artistic metal and all that. And I was always in the library, always in the library for my love of books and reading, but never did I dream that I'd be going to a college. Is that a good answer?
Yeah, I think I was more asking about during your time in the Army, if you had any time off, what would you do?
I didn't believe in leaving the base because I didn't leave the base simply because we weren't paid that much. I think at that time of my enlistment, I think it was $15 a month. What can you do with $15 during that span of time in the service?
Yeah. So during your service, what was your view of the Japanese?
Well, knowing the prisoners, and guarding them and talking to them, I met a Japanese admiral.
Could you explain a little bit more about that admiral, maybe?
Pardon me?
Could you explain a little bit more about how you met a Japanese admiral?
A Japanese admiral, and this was at the very end of the war where I was in Japan, finally. They flew us in from Okinawa to Japan, and it was my first meeting with the prisoners in Japan, though I had a lot of prisoners previously to worry about when we were bombing and them on the particular islands there. But intellectually, I think they were my equal. And yet, maybe their defense of the homeland really made them a little more warlike.
Yeah. And I'm sorry I interrupted you just then, but were you going to say anyone else who you met? Were you going to say any other notable Japanese people who you met?
Well, isn't it strange? My son is married to a Japanese girl, so you can imagine that I was amazed how humanely they should be treated after, during the war and finally at the surrender when we flew into Japan. So I used to separate the other prisoners. The Japanese take very much pride in their heritage and all that, and they have family histories stretching so many thousands of years, and I could appreciate their fighting so viciously and defensively. But after I grew to know them more through my son's marriage to a Japanese girl, I noticed that they are a typical population, good and bad.
Yeah. Do you have a happiest memory from the war? Do you have a happiest memory from the war?
Happy memories?
Yeah. Do you have maybe just one happy memory from the war?
I think discovering the Pacific region was what I always thought life should be. When we pulled into Hawaii with the troop ship, I saw a whole new world in the Pacific area, which I have never seen, and a different population, and the beautiful things that the Pacific area could offer. I would rather go there than Europe, where my daughter lives, mainly because just the ocean and the vicinity there and the color captured me.
Yeah. And what would your darkest memory of the war be?
You can talk louder.
What would your darkest memory of the war be?
The worst memories? I think seeing bodies, seeing the deceased bodies of our personnel and their personnel, the enemy personnel. I had two friends, two lackadaisical friends here who got in a lot of trouble, and they died at Iwo Jima. I could see them right now when I think about them. When they landed, they must have really have shivers in there. You know, when you were in the first or second or even the third wave there, those are the things that really shake me up.
Yeah. So what kinds of bonds did you make? What kinds of bonds did you make during the war?
What kind of
bonds with people did you make during the war?
Well, they looked at me. I was very young looking for my age and all that. And in the Marine Corps, you know, they used to call me chicken. And I would always, I meant to bring down a whole list of my friends that I have. And they were older than I by 2 or 3 or 4 years and all that. And when I read their names and addresses, which I wanted to show you, that I bonded with a lot of stateside people that really had history in them and love of the land.
Yeah, and how was that for you being so young when you joined?
When I joined up, I didn't realize when it ended that I would have the privilege of going to college and all that. In the meantime, I was looking towards my going through the grind and mill of the war, but it seems the Lord protected me, and I lived through it all.
Yeah. So you were in the war the day that ended, and so how was that for you that day? How was the day that the war ended for you?
How I felt at the end?
Yes.
I think the enemy could not keep up with our volume of everything, supplies, background of war machines and all that. I don't think, even though the Japanese had a marvelous navy, and even to this day, we acknowledge that the Japanese have a naval love, just like we have. And the more I read about Yamamoto and all those, I finally realized that I gave them credit for their production, but it wouldn't catch up with our particular production in warlike fashion.
So, how specifically did you feel at the end of the war?
Well, when I came out of it unscathed, it was a chance for me to get a little happiness in my life after the Depression in the 30s. I was sort of happy in the sense that with the GI Bill and education and all that, I'll finally get what I wanted, a better seizure of life than what I saw in the 30s.
Yeah. Just to quickly go back to your experiences during the war, what was the hardest decision that you ever had to make?
In what regard?
Just any regards during the war, what was the hardest decision that you had to make?
Well, the decision I made was I would like to actually become a teacher. And I've been a teacher for 33 years, 7 years in a private school and 26 years in the Boston public schools.
Yeah. I was asking more specifically about during your service.
Oh, my service?
During your service, what was the hardest decision that you had to make?
About the whole Marine Corps.
Yeah, well, just for you personally, what was your hardest decision that you had to make while you
The
served?
hardest decision I had to make after the war or before or during?
During the war.
Well, I was getting ready to more or less see it. A negative part of life when I was in the Marine Corps, even though I loved being a Marine, I would have loved to be, I would have liked to be an officer and more or less meet more enlisted men and officers. As an enlisted man, you know, we were limited in friendship, but when I don't know whether I'm giving you the right answer.
I mean, frankly, there's no right answer. But
I was very negative with life until I came out of the Marine Corps.
Yeah, so I think I was asking you more of what your hardest decision what you decided to do that was
the hardest decision I ever made was to choose my particular pursuit in going to college. I said I'll have to get a whole new high school education, and I received that through the GI Bill.
Yeah. Could you describe the day that you returned home from the war? Could you describe the day that you returned home from war?
I returned home by myself. I don't know. When I came home, it was nighttime, and I sat down right at the entrance to my house, and I couldn't believe that I came out of all that whole life previously. the 10 years in between, life kept giving me a chance to look, what should I do? What should I attain? What I should believe is the best for me. I think that was the hardest decision I ever made, choosing my life.
Mm-hmm. So how did you adapt to civilian life after you returned home from the war?
It took time. You had to prepare yourself very well. And I knew that before you could make a step, you have to be sure that you could attain that point of, and to make it a positive choice. I found people that ill-prepared to go any place until they make a choice and direction. And I know my love of learning was the best way for me to prepare myself, educational-wise.
And so, how did your experiences change you? How did your experiences change you?
My experiences changed. Gee, this. I don't know how to pinpoint what you want right now.
I'm just asking, how did you personally change from how you went in before the war to how you came out after?
Well, I would say being negative in the early part of my life and being more positive to overcome that negative that I suffered previously. I was born in 1924. Right now, I'm approaching next month to being 96 years old. And I thought though, at that time as I was leaving the service, I thought I'd go in the holy life, but that ended quickly when I came to the gift of they were given the servicemen.
So, how did your views on war change from where you went in to now where you are?
Boy, these are heavenly answers that you want from me, but I'm glad I went through the hard things of life. They prepared me more to make positive choices. But I still remember being a young person and in high school, learning a trade to exist, so to speak. And to this day, I'm able to make a livelihood physically and now physically and mentally. The ancient days that I went through was always negative. That life just didn't appeal to me. And when I saw a picking up a piece of bread from the gutter in the 30s, early 30s, and I ran to my mother and I said, I saw a person pick up a dry piece of bread from the gutter. And she said, bring that person here so we can feed him. You know, that was a little picture, a cameo of what life was earlier in my life. And right now, at least we have a better appreciation of livelihoods, choices, education.
All right. Thank you for that. Thank you so much for that. And do you have anything else you'd like to tell us about that?
Well, I thought I'd give you guys a picture of my children just scattered all my pictures. We're cleaning the house right now, and they threw out many of my pictures, especially one that I wanted you to see. And it showed my parents and I as we were in a picture of home life, and well, actually, you see that when mother and father, children, and perhaps the uncle, first uncle and the first aunt, you know, and all those memorable pictures were lost. My kids just threw them away. And especially my particular platoon, when I went to Paris Island, my first days of the Marine Corps. And I was so proud to go through all that basic training, which was really bone-breaking. And I was so proud to have that picture with the whole platoon and my drill instructor, and yet my daughter threw it out. I would love to show you my platoon pictures. That really gave me an outlook, a better outlook on human beings. I had guys from Pennsylvania, South Carolina, Georgia, and North Carolina, Florida, and especially New Jersey and New York, where we all meld into one unit. And I believe everybody's dead, and I'm surviving by the grace of God at 96.
All right. Thank you so much for your time and interviewing with us.